In the late 1800s, science was maturing into its modern form. The formation of theories shifted from theological studies to evidence-based conclusions using the scientific method. Two of the three men most responsible for the maturation of biology and paleontology in America were Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, whose bitter rivalry fueled their efforts. Their unwillingness to compromise led to many discoveries, but also disgraced American paleontology due to their underhanded and destructive methods for decades to come. Othniel Charles Marsh was born 1831 in New York to a family of modest income. Taking an interest in the natural sciences, he pursued a degree at Yale University. His efforts were supported by his wealthy uncle George Peabody, a banker and philanthropist. He became a respected paleontologist and defender of the theory of evolution. Cope, on the other hand, was born to a well-off family in 1840 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. After visiting museums he went to during boarding school, he gained an interest in biology. When he returned home, he continued his interest by publishing a paper on herpetology. He studied under renowned paleontologist Joseph Leidy, leading him to eventually be a paleontologist. In 1863, Cope went to Germany to study to avoid being drafted in the Civil War. There he met Marsh, who was preparing to be America's first paleontology professor by studying abroad. Due to their similar fields of expertise, the two men got along well, forming a friendship. However, this friendship would be short-lived. Cope and Marsh became enemies as a result of several incidents. After Leidy discovered Hadrosaurus, the first articulate dinosaur skeleton, Cope wanted to search the site. It was found in New Jersey. He invited Marsh over as well, but Marsh bribed the owner of the site to send all the fossils to him at Yale without Cope's permission. This made Cope distrust Marsh. In 1866, Cope described another dinosaur, this time a predator, which he named Laelaps. However, the name Laelaps was already taken by a group of mites, so Marsh changed the name to Dryptosaurus, yet again without Cope's permission. Cope was dismayed at the name change and insisted on calling the animal Laelaps. In 1869, Cope announced the discovery of Elasmosaurus. The animal was like Mary Anning's Plesiosaurus, but instead of a long neck and short tail, it had a long tail and short neck. Cope declared the animal to be a member of a new group of backwards plesiosaurs. However, when Marsh saw this, he suggested that the skull was on the wrong end of the Elasmosaurus, and the animal actually had a long neck and a short tail. Leidy confirmed these findings. Horrified, Cope tried his hardest to mend his mistake. He published a corrected paper with the same date as the original, and destroyed every copy of the mistake he could. Still, Marsh kept on reminding him of his mistake, even writing a newsletter about it over 20 years later. The animosity had become a rivalry. In the following years, Marsh and Cope competed to name the most genre of prehistoric creatures. When Leidy discovered Uintatherium, an odd prehistoric mammal, in 1872, both Marsh and Cope were determined to find their own prehistoric mammals. They sent teams to the Uintatherium site and described many different mammals. However, it was soon evident that many of the described animals were of the same creature. Marsh and Cope argued over whose name for each animal was the real one. The bickering got so bad, it got attention from the public and made Leidy leave the field, as he had enough with paleontology. Cope and Marsh concluded their debate in the American Naturalist. Cope published one dismissive paragraph, while Marsh wrote a venomous 9-page rebuttal. Soon after, the focus of Marsh and Cope and the main theater of the Bone Wars turned to the west. When Cope began to collect on lands that Marsh had claimed, Marsh sent 2 men to spy on Cope and his work. Trying to outdo the other, the 2 paleontologists tried to name as many genera as they could. New finds were hastily described and announced, leading to dubious genre. On multiple occasions, they often described the same dinosaur without acknowledging the other's paper. Marsh was negligent to his assistants and often took the credit all for himself, angering his men. He grew to be very paranoid, and when he couldn't bring back fossils from his quarry, he destroyed them so they wouldn't fall into Cope's hands. Final major confrontation was a debate in the New York Herald. Cope, who received a demand from the government to surrender his collection of fossils, published an article that lambasted Marsh, saying he did little research and took other people's credit. He also criticized the United States Geological Survey, naming it a scientific monopoly. Marsh countered by listing all of Cope's mistakes. including the Elasmosaurus incident. In the end, the government sided with Cope, letting him have his collection and slashing United States Geological Survey funding. Though the Bone Wars were more or less over, Cope and Marsh continued to hate each other till death, dying 1897 and 1899 respectively. The Bone Wars were a mixed bag for science. Before the Bone Wars, little was known about dinosaurs in the prehistoric world. During the rivalry, Marsh and Cope described over 100 different dinosaurs, including ones like Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, Diplodocus, Triceratops, Allosaurus, and Ceratosaurus. These dinosaurs have inspired generations of people, finding their ways into books and movies. With all these new discoveries, the evolutionary tree began to be filled. Marsh's discovery of toothed birds showed that the group changed over time, which Charles Darwin cited as the best support for the theory of evolution, in a letter congratulating Marsh for his discoveries. However, the Bone Wars greatly damaged paleontology as well. The reputation of American scientists were tarnished, as many saw them as untrustworthy. Joseph Leidy, the renowned paleontologist who trained Cope, left the field permanently due to Cope and Marsh's venomous arguing, which was a major loss for science. The funds for the United States Geological Survey were cut due to the Bone Wars, resulting in scientific progress slowing. The paranoia and haste of the two paleontologists led to shoddy studies and destroyed fossils. The reason for the destructive nature of the Bone Wars were due to the fact it was personal. Cope and Marsh desired to be greater than the other, as they hated each other. This meant that compromise between the two parties was nearly impossible. Perhaps if they had worked together for the benefit of science instead of themselves, better and less damaging studies could have been performed.